If you believe IGN is being biased, stop going to IGN. Let's talk about it. What's up, Game Boys and Girls? Big T here, back with another video. And this is, I guess, a video on the line of Starfield derangement syndrome. Now, it could be construed on either side with this one. I've talked before about gaming media and how inept they are, and you just can't really trust them because now it's all about engagement. That's what it's all about, engagement. And they will, put out stories and headlines to farm engagement. And the actual article may be about something completely different than what the headline is about. Because we're in a sad state in just society where you get rewarded for bad behavior or talking about negative things. That's just how things work. You get more attention by being negative, and you get more attention, just by uh, trying to upset people. And that's just how it works. And so nobody's above it. YouTubers obviously do it, but so does the so-called up and up uh, everyday average gaming journalism. They do that stuff too. Some are just more blatant than others, but they all do it. So there's a lot of talk around the Starfield reviews. They're really good, by the way, but there's a few outliers. I think there was one 5, but it was by a well-known kind of Sony uh, shill website. So you can't really do much about that. You can't really talk much about that. That it is what it is. So you kind of expect that from sites like that. But I think two of the outliers that most people are talking about is IGN and GameSpot. Now, I'll start with GameSpot first because I just think GameSpot is kind of bullshit on all their reviews and stuff like that. Um, I hate to use the word overly critical, but it just takes a lot for them to give you a decent score, even on a good, well-established game. I don't know. I don't know if there's any real bias there. I can't really see it. I don't care enough to research it. But I just think games. I want to say GameStop, GameSpot is what they are. They're kind of ridiculous in their ratings. I don't know if there's any bias there, other than, and I think they do a lot of the stuff they do to farm engagement. I think they are really harsh and negative on things because that gets them more clicks and more people talk about it, and it just perpetuates instead of just being, unfortunately, instead of just being good journalists doing your job the right way with integrity. I feel like the agenda there is to just be outrageously harsh and somewhat negative, and that's how you get engagement. So I don't know if there's any bias there, other than a bias towards getting engagement. But GameSpot, I said the game. But IGN is a little different. Now, I haven't really paid a lot of attention. Like I felt like IGN was really bullshit during the Wii U days. Again, I think a lot of people were hyped or got out of pocket or excited about negativity around when it came to Nintendo. A lot of people were kind of waiting for the downfall, hoping for the downfall of Nintendo. There was a lot of energy on that side, and I felt like IGN somewhat catered to that stuff. They, will put out kind of ridiculous articles here and there, and on and on. So on the Nintendo side, a lot of Nintendo fans felt like the media was pretty biased against Nintendo. Um, I don't know if I completely agreed with that, but I could see it. I saw it. But I also understand that Nintendo was in a bad spot. Nintendo's games will save them once Nintendo got it together as far as that kind of stuff goes. they would be fine at the end of the day. And obviously, the Switch proves that because the Switch has a lot of problems, hardware wise, that the Wii U had. But because it's selling well, and I said that back then, if it sells well, a lot of these so-called problems will go away, and it'll be mostly positive coverage, and that's what happened with the Switch. Switch still has a lot of the same problems the Wii U had, but because it sold better, it gets more games. None of those problems really exist anymore. And I said it about Xbox. I said because a lot of guys felt there was a bias because Xbox is down. They were down for years, especially during the Xbox One era. A lot of energy on the other side, just kind of hating on them, dunking on them, hoping that they would go away. Even though they claimed that they wanted Xbox to compete, they really just wanted it to go away. They didn't like the competition from Microsoft, and the competition was pretty weak to where there's a lot of rumors that Microsoft was thinking about selling off the Xbox division. But Phil Spencer came in, he had his ideas, and they seemed to work out pretty well in the end to where we are today. So I said, as long as Microsoft, Xbox start putting out quality games, there would be a lot of that stuff would go away. A lot of stuff that people talk about when it comes to Xbox, there's a lot of negativity, a lot of just overemphasis on so-called problems with Microsoft. Once they start dropping, consistent good games, I think a lot of those problems will go away. They start selling more, a lot of stuff will go away. But a lot of fans believe that IGN was biased, and I wasn't really on that. But they presented a lot of compelling evidence. And I think the guy's name is Dan Stapleton. He's like one of the major editors there. I don't know if he's the lead editor, but a lot of stuff goes through him. I think reviews go through him. He decides who reviews what. I think there were other reviewers who wanted to do Starfield, but he took it upon himself, and so he reviewed it and he gave it a 7. And a lot of what he was saying didn't really match up to the score. And fans do what they do. They get on the internet and they they started to find a lot of information out about Dan here, and there was a lot of negative stuff when it came to Xbox coming from Dan. He didn't like the idea of the merger. He didn't like the fact that Bethesda joined Xbox. He gave previous Bethesda games higher scores when the Bethesda was an independent company, but now that they're with Microsoft, he seemed to kind of skew the review. And if you look at the type of games that he was talking about before, like Deathloop, I think he gave a 10. That game doesn't deserve a 10, but again, that's his opinion, right? Some people thought the game was Game of the Year. Did it win? I think it did win, right? I don't know. But it was definitely one of the nominees. And so people started digging this stuff out. They found a photo of him dressed up in cosplay, Kratos cosplay. And he just had a lot of like negative tweets about the merger. Negative. He didn't like the fact that I said Bethesda joined. He doesn't like ABK joining, and so he seems to be, you know, skewed against a lot of stuff when it comes to Microsoft. Now I don't know if he's a Sony fanboy, but that's been put out there. He got into a spat with Tim Dog, who's a big Xbox guy, and it just looked really unprofessional. You're like a big dude at IGN. You make a lot of decisions, and you're on Twitter really looking suspect in your replies. Just leave that stuff alone. You're not going to win a Twitter argument. You're only going to look bad, and you looked really bad. Now, the people who want you to not look bad will jump in and say, "Oh no, it's fine what he's saying. Who is this Tim Dog guy?" But if that's the case, why are you responding? And why are you doing this defensive posture? It looks really bad. Just let it go. Say, this is my review. That's how I truly felt. Move on. But he didn't do that. He tried to defend himself. And then IGN themselves, because they were getting a lot of heat, especially from Xbox guys, saying that they're biased. And they've been saying this for a long time. It had nothing to do with just uh, uh, Starfield. They were saying this way before Starfield. And so they felt defensive. And they put out a reissue or repost of an article they from 2 years ago about Forza Horizon 5 and how they scored it high and it was their game of the year, IGN game of the year, to make the point that they weren't biased. Although if you do something like that, if you talk about checking out an article from a couple of years ago, and see we're good, we're down with you guys. That looks really sad and pathetic, and it makes people think, yeah, you're really trying hard to let people know that no, we're not against Xbox, and it just looks really weird. So what I would say to Xbox fans, if you believe this, don't get in a tizzy. Don't yeah, you can talk about it or whatnot, but put your money where your mouth is. Don't go to IGN for anything. Don't let them bait you or any of that stuff. If you really believe that's what they're doing over there, stop visiting their website. All of you, just stop. And that will be a pretty big dent in their engagement. Especially the better Xbox does. And it looks like the future is pretty bright on the Xbox side. So when these bigger games start coming out, these big games continue to come out and they do well. If you guys aren't on their website, who's going to be watching these articles? Who's going to be reading these articles? It's not going to be Sony fans. It's not going to be PC guys. Maybe it'll be a few of them because they'll get the games too. But if you leave, it will hurt them. So that is the best way to do it. If you really believe what you're saying, then do that. Because going after the guy on Twitter, and well, you're not going to get, if it's true, you're not going to get him to admit that he's biased. And he's sorry. That's just not going to happen. He's going to do what he's doing, which is being defensive and defending himself. Or he should not do that. I would say, as a company guy, a big dude in the company, don't engage. But he's choosing to. I guess he feels really defensive about it, so he's doing that. How do I feel? Like I said, I feel like there's some really compelling evidence, specifically about this guy. I don't know as a company overall, but specifically about him, I feel the evidence is pretty compelling. It's hard to ignore. And I don't like bias in any form. I'm a big Nintendo guy, and I hated the idea of, I can't remember his name right now, but he's the guy who runs the podcast for the Nintendo stuff, the Nintendo podcast. He was the one that was going to review the Steam Deck, which I'm a fan of, and I was like, no, don't get the Omega Nintendo dude to review the Steam Deck, because there's a lot of energy around Steam Deck versus Switch and all this kind of stuff, and I don't think he would give a fair review. And I thought his review was pretty middling. I think there was some bias in that review. He was just saying things that were wrong, because I don't know if he didn't just pay enough attention to the Switch or the Steam Deck, but he was saying wrong things about features and what it could do and all that kind of stuff. And I just thought it was very obvious that he was biased against the Steam Deck because it was competition for the Switch. And it just was really obvious, and I hated the idea he did that. Again, as a Nintendo guy, I was still trying to be fair in my assessment and making sure that device got reviewed right. And I think a guy who just, and Dan Stapleton, who's, I hope I'm saying his name right, who has been showing himself to be really critical of Microsoft, that guy should not be reviewing the big Microsoft game from Bethesda. That he should not be doing that. they have this thing in law where you it's not, what is it called when you kind of take yourself out of the equation because you have some kind of personal uh, involvement, some kind of I forget what it's called, but there's a term where you kind of disavow yourself from that case or whatever, because you have some kind of tie to it. Maybe a family member is knows the person, something like that. And so when you present yourself that way, you should not be allowed to review these things. You should yourself say, all right, I'm critical. I'm not going to review this thing, just in the case of full disclosure, just to make sure there's nobody thinking that I'm not being fair, because they know how I feel about this company. That way, there's no way that you have any kind of real evidence or proof that this person is being biased against the company for this game. Even though the game is good, they gave it a 7. 7 is a good score, but we all know in gaming, when it comes to the top tier, the top to top, 7 is not good enough. That is a okay game. Even though if you look at the ratings, it's not really, it's called good, but we know good for a game that's supposed to be what Starfield's supposed to be is not nearly good enough, right? So he should have, I keep saying disavowed. That's the only word I can think of. No, it's not the right word. But he should have taken himself out of the equation, let somebody else review the game, and you wouldn't have these problems. So going forward, people are going to continue to think this about your company, that they're biased against Microsoft. True or not true, I don't know. But like I said, the evidence was compelling in this specific case. So, Microsoft fans, Xbox fans, if you believe this, don't engage, and you'll get some movement, because it'll hurt them. So, and you hurt them that way. You don't go after the guy. You know, you can make your point. You can argue with him if he's gonna reply to you, especially, which he shouldn't be doing. Um, you can make your point and move on. So that's where I am with this. Let me know what you guys think. Is there a conspiracy? I hate to use it that way because that sounds like I'm being facetious or dismissing it. Because I kind of see where they're coming from with this specific case and this specific person. I think they do have some relevant points here. So let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thank you again for watching and listening. And see you fools next time. Peace out.